Syndicate, assemble!
Superman, the first superhero for several decades, absolutely the best-selling comic book. Starting in the 70s, his popularity started to decline a little bit as the Marvel characters became more popular. The past 20 years or so, Batman has clearly started to outsell him. He's the first choice among young readers. The response I usually hear is Superman's boring because he's invulnerable, Superman's boring because he's perfect, there's no challenges. My response to that is that I think the mistake people make is that they treat superheroes like video game characters. A superhero's purpose is to fight other people who are also powerful, and that makes the interesting story. And so you get the typical, who would win in a fight between Wolverine and, the Thing? It doesn't matter. None of that crap matters. In the 1950s and 60s, Superman stories were all intellectual. They're always about, the man who sold life insurance to Superman, right? So my question is, what is the reason that Superman's popularity has declined? Is it because his character is actually less appealing, or is it because readers just don't really understand the way the character works?
I think a lot of the decline in the character has been because so many modern comics are just like big wrestling matches. I think what appealed to people in the 60s and what appealed obviously to people in the 30s is that these are emotional characters. These are people who touched on their heart. Superman's vulnerability, his real vulnerability, is like they said in the movie, right? He cares too much about those people. He doesn't want them hurt. I mean, that's where, if you want a good Superman story, put other people in danger, put him in a situation where he has to decide who he's going to save. That's where the real core of the connection is between the reader and the character. I do have to say, though, that I think Superman is popular, but not in the comics. I think Superman is popular in cartoons. I think he has the potential to be more popular in the regular movies. I don't know how many kids I see walking around, or their folks taking pictures of them wearing Superman pajamas.
Absolutely.
I mean, every little kid wants to be Superman. Just give them a red bath towel, strap it on the back of the, on their back, and they'll jump off any couch if they want to fly.
So maybe the real issue is it's not that Superman's not popular with the general public. He's not popular with the fanboy. Is that the problem, Kevin?
Well, it's a couple of things. The comics are not marketed to an 8 to 10-year-old. They're marketed to 18 and over. And I don't know what it is with us. We are obsessed with darkness, cynical, apocalyptic stories. We want to relish in it. And, there's so much of that despair we see from the news stories, everything in the real world. I don't want to read that all the time. I want to read something that's uplifting. And so I think that they're trying to appeal to the fanboy in the group, and you get, well, he's not realistic enough. He's not this. He's not dark. He's not violent enough. And so it's unfortunate that way everyone wants a certain way.
I mean, he's obviously still popular, right? He's Superman, for crying out loud. Sure. Everyone can recognize him, him, Mario from Mario Brothers, and Jesus. I think these are the three most iconic.
Mickey Mouse, maybe?
Mickey Mouse gets thrown in there. Well, he's not really a man, you see.
Oh, that's
Anyways,
true.
no, but
Sorry.
I don't know. I think, when Christopher Reeve was doing Superman, that was an easy sell. That was amazing. It was incredible. Now, I think in just the modern version, people are probably just sick of him. He can do everything, right? Like, that's always the argument I get, why he's not so popular. I mean, Batman's flawed, Wolverine is cranky, other things like that. And Superman is just, if there's no danger of him losing.
I have to say, I think that you have a common point of view, and I think probably for the last 50 years it's been kind of like that. But I think Morrison's really opened it up, because what he's done is he said this rough and tumble Superman, this rebel, as he first was, is now part of an accessible storyline for current authors. So if they want to have a character who's out there for the common man, writing injustices and things like that, that kind of character is now available. They can tell, Superman Year One stories like they have been with Batman for like the last 20 years. And now that's more accessible. And I think that Superman can be more popular, but I think the one that we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years has been an authority figure. And I think a lot of people don't identify with that.
Well, someone's got to be in charge.
And it's funny because I heard a response recently that the reason Superman was popular in the 30s and 40s and not so much today is because back then people were more innocent, and now we're jaded and we're cynical, and because we've seen more and we live. And I thought about it, and I thought, no, actually, the generation that grew up reading Superman and putting its sales, past 1 and 2 million, grew up during the Great Depression. They fought in World War II, and many of those soldiers are the ones that read these comics. This generation has never really seen war. They've seen images of violence, which is not the same. They haven't lived through it. They're much more privileged, much more spoiled. It's almost like they're so cynical that they're not able to appreciate, I guess, an idealized, romanticized hero. Could that be the problem?
It might be. I think that the people who are reading Superman, I mean, you look at Siegel and Schuster, their parents came up through World War I. Yeah. That was horrendous. I mean, it was in many ways worse than World War II. I think that the character provides people with that sense of hope, that sense of possibility, and I think as you know, coming out of the Great Recession, I think that Superman has that potential to be there for people again, to be that beacon, that thing that we aspire to. I mean, if you're going to have to choose between being a cynical person who focuses on doom and gloom and we're never going to make it and this is all horrible and we're going to die penniless and insane, or you want to focus on like, hey, I can make the world a better place. Who's my model for doing that? Who's my model for stepping in and being there for the person who can't defend themselves, who needs help? You know, I don't have to always be paying attention to myself. I can be there for somebody else, and Superman is that model that people can aspire to. I think if they focus on that, it's not unrealistic. I mean, look, he's up against wife beaters. He's up against people who are murdering other people, and I think that he can be someone who we can aspire to.
And, you know, it reminds me of another response I hear, that the reason that Superman is not appealing is because the idealism of Superman isn't realistic today, and I say it is, because it does take discipline and it does take choice to do the things Superman does, and that's why he's a great character, right? He can do anything. He could kill anybody. He could take over the earth if he wanted to with the powers he has. He chooses to do good, and that's why he's such an appealing character, because with someone in that position of power, they choose to do good, and therefore he's someone for us to admire. So I think what happens is people, they feel like, well, I'm flawed, so Superman should be flawed. I'm depressed, so Superman should be depressed. I have nothing to look up to. Meh, that fricking word that I want stricken from all records of English language. I fricking hate it. And I think that same exact mentality is the reason that Superman, unfortunately, is not as popular as he used to be.
Well, everything's grays. I mean, even the books are colored in muddy grays now. You know, when we make decisions there, you know, that the black and white, there are good and bad decisions, but we try to gravitate towards, well, you know, it depends, and it's all grays, and it's not. So it's hard for people to see someone that is trying to do good versus the bad, and not in between. I think the thing too is I don't think DC's really put the effort in to change that perception for the newer generations. I mean, you look at Batman for quite a while until the mid 80s, late 80s, when you had Frank Miller coming in with him, and then the Batman movie. It was the bam wow. It was the 60s Batman. People thought Batman was a joke for some time, and they really pushed about how he was, you know, he used to be this way, he was dark, and they pushed it. I don't think they've done that enough with Superman. And actually, what they did for Superman was in the early 90s is to show people don't take him for granted, is they killed him off. And the common person thought, oh, well, I better buy the book. Well, then they got everyone upset because the common person who's not a comic collector doesn't realize they come back after they die. So he didn't really help their image with Superman, and he got tied in with all that area. So yeah, it's tough. I think there's possibility with him. And I think Grant Morrison was trying to show that, you know, he is a badass. He was. And
that shows even in the Morrison, in the very first issue, where his landlady says, yeah, did you hear about it? He took care of the wife beater and broke some ribs and the hip and all that. So he starts out as a rough guy. I think it's the same type of dynamic that we see with a lot of 20-year-olds. They are very idealistic. Maybe they're coming out of college or high school or whatever. They're idealistic. They want to make a difference in the world. And as they grow and move on, like Clark Kent Superman does, they find out, hey, I can't do everything that I wanted to do. People are getting hurt even though I think I'm doing the right thing. It's not necessarily nuanced. And I think we see that in the evolution of the character. I think Morrison did a really good thing when he retained that evolution within the character.
You know what? I think what it comes down to is, like you were saying earlier about comic books being wrestling matches. Good drama is not a punch-out between Superman and a robot. Good drama is, who's Superman going to save? Is he going to save Lois Lane, or is he going to save Hackensack, New Jersey? Yeah. That is good drama. And that's why Superman's interesting, and I think if we pay attention to the decisions he makes, we have something to learn from that. And that's why he's always been my hero.